Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland.
And all across the fantasy universe, what's going on out there? It's Brian Drake from the Fantasy Football Hustle. We're here. It's Thursday night. We're ready to just blow our I got to start this over, guys. I'll be honest with you guys right here. This is a little peek behind the curtain, gentlemen. I went to start the show and a error message popped up saying that it's not broadcasting on my Twitter feed, and it just threw me for a loop. I'm a broadcasting professional. I went to school for this, but I'm not going to lie. It threw me for a loop. So, that's what happens when you do things on the fly. But hey, let's rock and roll here. Brian Drake, fightingchancefantasy.com. You guys know us. You love us the last few weeks. Cody Main, Ryan Reynolds from establishtherun.com. We're going to talk about the divisional playoff round, DFS 4-game slate this week. It's going to be awesome. No Dwayne this week. He's still out on his family excursion, but don't worry. He hasn't gone anywhere. He'll be back, ready to do shows with us, including this Tuesday when we have Jordan McNamara talking Dynasty. So, gentlemen, we're back. It was a great wild card weekend. Cody, how'd you do? Did you win any cash?
We got back to even on the Cleveland Pitt game. Some late swaps got us there back to even, but it was a pretty rough slate. A lot of John Brown and just not enough of the right pieces. But hey, we're back for another slate. And as I told you guys in the group chat, I think this might be, and like I said, I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but this might be my favorite ever short 4-game slate. So I'm excited to dive into it.
How about you, Ryan? How did the wild card weekend treat you?
And DFS, because I was heavy on Russell Wilson, but I did well with betting.
There we go. Crack one open, folks. If you're hanging out with us, put the kids to bed. The wife's not, she's not going to know about all the money you're going to spend this weekend and not lose. You're going to win. We're going to win money here because it's a great slate, and I got a couple of smart guys with me. And really, on a slate like this, it's so exciting because we have just a plethora of unbelievable quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. Oh, hey, you ever hear these guys? Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees. What a slate for quarterbacks. So we'll talk about which guy we're going to pick, how we're going to build these lineups, how we're going to stack, who we're going to use to correlate, and it's just going to be an exciting hour of fantasy football talk. If you like what you're seeing here, folks, like, comment, subscribe on that YouTube page. If you're listening on iTunes to the Fantasy Football Hustle, subscribe, leave a 5-star review. And I don't know if we're going to see a 5-star performance this weekend out of Aaron Rodgers because he is going to have his biggest test of the season in the Los Angeles Rams. Saturday, 4:35 Eastern kickoff here. Opened up with a Packers -7. We're about a 46.5 total right now for the Packers. It went down to 45.5. Weather looks okay, 35 degrees at kickoff and cloudy. So we're going to have Jared Goff going into Lambeau, California kid. Weather's going to be kind of brisk. Packers going to be without David Bakhtiari. Aaron Donald looks like he's going to play. So let's get into this game, guys. And Ryan, let's start with you on this one. What are your thoughts, big picture on the game, from a football perspective, from a betting perspective? What do you feel?
I mean, my biggest concern here is the status of Jared Goff. I think if Goff was fine, the Rams would actually have a shot at knocking the Packers off here because from a defensive standpoint, especially with Bakhtiari out, like you mentioned, Aaron Donald, for a play extender like Rodgers, interior pressure's the worst to deal with. So that factored where they're going to have to double him. Players like Leonard Floyd or Ekuban, getting edge pressure. Like we talked about before we went live, Ramsey doesn't necessarily shadow. So there should still be opportunities for the volume monster Adams, who's really the only NFL caliber pass catcher on the Packers. I know for me, I'll probably be playing Aaron Jones quite a bit. But from a betting perspective, I would probably take the Rams in the points. I would do so with a bit of fear because of the status of Jared Goff, and I'm not sure how the Rams offense is going to fare against a Packers defense that's at least solid. But I would definitely play the under here. If Rodgers has a good game, he's literally going to carry this offense against a team that he's at a talent disadvantage against. What are your thoughts on Adams specifically this week, Cody?
You know how I play. I'm not worried about Ramsey all that much.
Right.
Is it ideal? No. Would I rather him be playing against a softer defense? Of course, but I mean the volume is there, the talent is there, and I don't know. I saw this on Twitter, but people were saying someone said it's not a bad.
Are you still with us? Sorry, we had a little connection issue on my end. I apologize. Keep going.
Someone said on Twitter it's not a bad matchup for Adams. It's a bad matchup for Ramsey, and I kind of agree. I mean Ramsey's going to have his hands full with Adams as much as Adams is going to have his hands full with Ramsey. So if you want to play Ramsey, I'm not all that opposed to it. It looks like he's kind of clearing away, going to be one of the favorite plays on the slate at the wide receiver position. So if you want to go that route, he's also the most expensive on DraftKings. If you want to go that route, I kind of want to pair him with Rodgers, I think, but I don't want to play a Rodgers single stack because I think that's how most people will choose to play that. I think most people, if they're playing Adams and Rodgers, it's just going to be that, and they're going to find a way to bring it back with somebody or just play it without a bring back from the Rams side. But on the Rams side, Ryan, if you think it's going to stay close and if you think they can pull away potentially and even win outright, I think I'm pretty interested in Cam Akers.
Mm-hmm. Cam Akers, 20-plus carries in 4 of the last 5 games, including 30 touches last week. He's 5,700. I think he's going to get a lot of action for sure.
Yeah, since Henderson went down, he's handled 70.8% of the team's carries, 10% target share, which is fine. We're mostly playing him for the work on the ground. That averages out to 27.5 touches per game. He's handled 8 of 9 red zone rushing attempts, all the carries inside the 5-yard line. And the Rams, I mean, they know that Goff isn't right, obviously, right? I mean, and they're going to be playing in a cold weather game. His hand's still messed up. So their situation neutral pass rate dropped to 52% over the past 2 weeks. I think they're going to be a run heavy offense as long as they can afford to be. And I think the way that they keep this game close is, like Ryan said, through defense and on the legs of Cam Akers. So if I play like an Aaron Rodgers plus Devontae Adams, I'm going to find another Green Bay pass catcher to pair him with because Rodgers just isn't adding anything through Diggs. And the Rodgers plus Adams stack is just going to be pretty popular. So it would be for me somebody like Adams and Tunyon, or you can take a stab at somebody like MVS and just hope he catches a deep ball. I know Ryan will probably scoff at that, but and then I'm going to bring it back with Akers. So I don't. What are your thoughts on Akers matchup, Ryan?
Well, one thing that I've been thinking of is McVay and LaFleur. LaFleur is part of McVay's coaching tree, so they're familiar with each other. One thing that the Rams like to do a lot is jet sweeps. So I think Akers. I agree with you entirely that if the Rams are going to stay in this game, it's going to be behind their defense, being able to run the ball effectively. But I also think those jet sweeps with either Kupp or Woods will be part of the equation as well. Like I said, if Goff was healthy, I literally think the Rams might knock them off because I'm not so much worried about the cold weather. Goff's problem usually is if you can disrupt him, he's a totally different guy. If he has a clean pocket, he's pretty good. But with that finger, not really looking to play that too much. On the other side, Green Bay's pass rush is good. So I think Goff has the conditions where he could succeed if his finger's better than we think it is. But again, that's a very big unknown variable. And again, I'm with you. If we're playing Adams, I'm playing Akers with the most likely as a bring back versus Woods or Kupp.
Yeah, and we talked about this. We talked about this off air. We don't think that Goff is really necessary on this slate. We'll talk about some cheaper options at the quarterback position that we feel more comfortable with down the road a little bit, but we just don't think Goff is really all that necessary on this slate. So it really sets up as basically a Rodgers stack if you want to go that route, and then most likely Cam Akers or even Akers one off. I just think he's going to get enough work as long as the game stays close enough. Now, we haven't seen them get down 14, 21 points. So if the Packers just put it on them, maybe Akers isn't in the game getting those drop offs. But I think the Malcolm Brown experiment's pretty much over. So I did want to ask you guys I just mentioned how I'm not scared of Jalen Ramsey, right? Just because of how good Adams is. Mm-hmm. What do you think about Jair Alexander and Kevin King on the outside? And if Kupp can't go, or if he can, you got Kupp in the slot, who most likely avoids those guys. Yep. Or if he can't go, then you've got Woods, who probably slides into the slot. Do you have any interest in either of those guys?
Possibly. I don't think I'd be overweight on either one of them, but yeah, I understand your reasoning. I also want to throw in something. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they don't travel. Those guys are going to stay on a side also. Yeah. So I think you're dead on with Robert Woods sliding into the slot. Ryan and I were talking off air, Devontae Adams with Jalen Ramsey. You mentioned he doesn't travel. He's primarily just covers the boundary X receiver. So I think Devontae Adams is going to slide into the slot a lot more than we think this week because they want to keep him away from Ramsey. And if he can just go out there and run around with MVS, running him to the goalpost every play to get him tired, I absolutely think that'll be a play for those guys. So what was your last thought there, Ryan?
What I was going to say to, piggyback on what Cody said about MVS. In week 17, Bears 30-year-old linebacker Trevathan was lined up in the slot on MVS on a cover zero blitz, and Rodgers hit him in stride for like a 60-yard touchdown. So that kind of thing's in play all the time. MVS isn't really a good player, but he is fast, and Rodgers, in my opinion, is the most talented quarterback to ever play the game. So sure, he can make anyone relevant on any given Sunday, or in this case Saturday.
Right.
Any interest in Tunyon at 4,200? You only need 800 more to get up to Andrews. Kelsey's obviously priced higher than anybody. It's 7,800, but after him it gets a little dicey. But Tunyon, any interest?
I mean, we talk about it all the time that if we're playing Rodgers, it's so easy just to correlate with the quarterback position. Plus, Tunyon's the type of guy that doesn't really need the volume to get there. He's just proven to be kind of a touchdown machine. So yeah, so if you want to play that double stack, you can totally get the classic 12 for 100 and a touchdown from Adams, and then still get there with even like 4 for 40 and a touchdown from Tunyon. So he's second on the team in end zone targets with 8 behind obviously Adams. So I have no issue in going that route. And he's going to be pretty low owned because, like you mentioned, there's a guy we'll touch on in the Kansas City Cleveland game, 2 guys obviously with Kelsey, but there's another cheap guy there that's going to catch some ownership, I think. And then we'll talk about Andrews, who I have a lot to say on. So
let me ask you guys this question for our listeners out there who may not be total GPP bros, and maybe they're more a cash game guy, or they're just kind of getting into this and getting their feet wet. In a slate like this, when you only have 4 games, should this just be double, triple stack correlation? You're not trying to just pick off, oh, I like the best player here and a guy here and a guy here. Like, you want everything to kind of play off the other guy, right?
Yeah, you definitely want to correlate your lineups, and even I think even more so on short slates. If you like, we saw it with the Cleveland Pitt game last week. There's no better example than that. That game just completely went off because the game script got a little weird from the beginning. They were down 28-21, 28-0 fairly quickly, and then Ben Roethlisberger completed 50 passes. So in those type of game scripts, you just want to pick the game that goes off. Now, it doesn't have to be that type of game script. You can get the one where it's just back and forth. So you're looking for explosive plays. You're looking for teams that are fast paced. You're looking for teams that are going to throw a lot. And if they're not going to throw a lot, you want them to be able to hit big plays. But yeah, you should absolutely be correlating. You can certainly jam in the triple, double stacks, double bringbacks, and just hope you pick the right game. But I think another way we can go on this slate with so many good options, and we're going to touch on so many throughout this show, but there's so many good options at each position this week where we didn't really have that last week. And when that's the case, you can kind of get away with these mini correlations. So if you wanted to go Cam Akers and Devontae Adams and not play Rodgers, that's totally viable on a slate like this, because there's going to be some quarterbacks and some game totals that we're really interested in coming up down the road. So yeah, you either kind of want to mini correlate with one offensive player from each side, or you just want to stack up the game.
I think we're going to see a lot of ownership coming out of the next contest, and it's Saturday night in Orchard Park, New York. It's the Ravens taking on the Buffalo Bills. The Bills opened -3 with a 49.5 total. Now it's down to 2.5. while the total has moved to 50 in some spots. The weather here is going to be talked about a lot. So I live in upstate New York, so I checked the weather out for a couple days from now. 32 degrees with a 60% chance of snow. Looks like they could get probably around 2 inches, which in upstate New York is basically July. So 2 inches is nothing, but 2 inches could play havoc on a guy like Lamar Jackson, who's not used to playing in the snow. Winds 10 to 20, gusts to possibly 30 miles an hour. I know, Ryan, that's something that you're very big into. Injury-wise in this game, the only real substantial one from a fantasy perspective is Bills running back Zach Moss. He's out, so we'll talk about Singletary in a second. So, Ryan, give me your 3,000-foot view on the Bills-Ravens, which way you're leaning with your bets, and just any other insights you might have.
This game, from a sides perspective, is probably my least favorite to bet on. I'd probably lean the Ravens, and I don't feel very good about that at all. Buffalo's a very well-built team. They're well-coached. Allen's been spectacular this year. One thing that I personally have to be mindful of heading into this slate is Josh Allen is essentially the entire Bills offense.
Yeah,
they don't really have a running game. That's not the case really for anyone else in this slate. He literally, if the Bills offense fails, he's going to fail. But if they even score 27 points like they did last week, he's going to account for most of it. The Ravens defense, their secondary at least, is well equipped to handle the Bills, I'd say. But being able to cover receivers and man isn't really, the only variable in the equation. You have to be able to pressure the quarterback. How well they're going to do that is I'm less confident in that. So I think this game has a very wide range of outcomes on that front. On the other side, I think Baltimore is going to do what they do, which is run the ball. I think Andrews is an interesting matchup because I've said this every time we talk about Lamar. What Lamar brings to the table is he creates space with his speed. So he creates space for his running backs. He's obviously, a tremendous rushing threat himself. So even more than normal, linebackers are going to suck up when Lamar, shows a handoff or anything like that. So I think that creates opportunities for Andrews. I would lean towards this game being a slight under, but I'm not entirely confident about that either. So that's pretty much where I'm at this point on that game.
Cody, let's get your thoughts here. Mark Andrews, we mentioned him a second ago, 5,000. The Bills were the 5th worst team versus the tight end, allowing 15 PPR points per game. I think if you're going to go Lamar, and why wouldn't you? Because he's just been so damn good last week, throwing for 179 and running for 136. Let's say we start with a Lamar Jackson lineup. Where else are you going on the Ravens to correlate or to stack with Lamar, and how are you going to bring that back with Buffalo?
Yeah, Lamar's a unique beast because he accounts for so much of his fantasy upside with his legs, and we all know that, right? I mean, he's handled 30% of the team carries, which is actually highest on the team, surprisingly. He only has 3 carries inside the 5-yard line, compared to 10 apiece for Dobbins and Gus the Bus Edwards. But he leads the team in red zone carries, so like he's getting the work in that area. I don't know if it's just fluky that he hasn't really been getting those quote unquote goal line rushes, but he accounts for so much of his fantasy upside on with his legs that he's kind of a unique beast in that we don't need to double stack Lamar. And you mentioned it with Andrews, is since they came off that COVID outburst that they had towards the latter part of the season. Since week 14, Andrews leads the team in target share at 31%. He's just behind Marquise Brown in air yard share at 34%, and he's got 4 end zone targets since week 14. Despite all that volume, he's like really, really underperformed. That's 23 targets over the past 3 weeks, and he's turned that into 14 receptions for 144 yards and no touchdowns. So he's kind of been he's been a huge box score disappointment for us, right? But you mentioned it with this Bills defense. They've been targeted by tight ends at the league's highest rate. And they just gave it up to the Colts tight ends last week, like really bad. And that was Mo Alley Cox and Jack Doyle and Trey Burton. And now those are all fine players, right? But they're not Mark Andrews.
And we were on that. We just said on the show, hey, there's just too many of these guys. You can't pick which one's going to go off. They're all going to get it. And they did.
Yeah, so I like Andrews a lot as my stack with Lamar. I don't think I'm really going to double stack with Lamar. I just don't think there's enough pass volume in that offense.
Okay.
Even if the game gets behind, they've pretty much shown that they want to they want to run the ball. They're going to do that with Lamar. They're going to do that with their stable of backs, and they're going to take their chances on a couple shot plays. But yeah, I like Andrews a lot. I think everything sets up for him. The price is good. I think the ownership is going to be held kind of in check just because of how bad he's been lately from a box score perspective. So you get pretty good leverage there off of a popular Kelsey. And I think he's like the one guy on the slate. There's a few other guys that I like at a price per dollar perspective or a point per dollar perspective, but I think he's like the one guy that can actually compete with Kelsey in terms of just raw fantasy points. So you could still win the tight end position with Andrews. And then if I'm bringing it back, yeah, I mean, the total antithesis of the Baltimore offense, the Bills are just chucking.
Yep.
And I think with Zach Moss out, he's kind of their grinder, right? I think with him out, they're just going to lean heavily into those 4 wide receiver sets.
Mm-hmm.
They were already like second in the league in 4 wide receiver sets. So they've got Diggs healthy. Obviously, Beasley's kind of back to full health. John Brown played on 97% of snaps last week, and they even kept the rookie Gabe Davis involved. So I think they're gonna lean on those 4 guys. And I saw a note on Twitter from Ian Hartitz over at PFF. The Ravens' struggles against 4 wide receiver sets in 2020 shouldn't be understated. They were 21st in yards per attempt, 23rd in explosive pass rate, 26th in passer rating. So if the Bills go to that 4 wide receiver set, I don't know if the Ravens are fully equipped to stop that. I know that they've got some names in that secondary that are pretty good, but I'm fully okay with even something like a Lamar plus Mark Andrews and bring it back with 2 Bills pass catchers. So just eat up all the pass volume in that Bills offense.
Let's talk about the other side now, guys. And Ryan, you mentioned it. This game is all on Josh Allen. We know they're not going to run the ball with Singletary. Singletary's 4,500. For a little context, the 3 games that Moss missed, he did have weeks near 90% snap rate, but he's not the goal line back. He's kind of small. He's very scat backish. So this is going to be all on Josh Allen, 7,400, who may come in as the 3rd highest owned quarterback on the slate. So you might get Allen. You're not getting a discount per se, but if he's the 3rd highest owned quarterback, he still has a chance to be the QB1 on the day. And this was an interesting stat I found. He was blitzed the most of any quarterback in the NFL. And the Ravens are going to play a ton of single high. They're going to play man, and they're going to blitz him. He was completing 64% of his passes for 14 touchdowns and 2 picks, which was the best in the league. So he can handle it. And if he does on Saturday night, the Bills have a great shot of winning. So let's talk about if we're going that way. Now, Josh Allen, Ryan, we're going to start with him. How would you build around Josh Allen?
One thing I like heading into this week, now granted the wind bothers me a little bit because, and I'll do a little segue here. I went to Giant Stadium a lot in my early 20s, and I've been there when there's 30-mile-an-hour gusts, and it absolutely impacts what you can do throwing the ball. Orchard Park, from what I recall, in Buffalo, is a similar built stadium to old Giant Stadium. So I'm probably more concerned than Cody is about that.
Yeah, this stadium here is
with
built
that. Just want to play like John. What's that?
The stadium in Buffalo too. It's built down into the ground. When you walk up to it, it's the field level is 200 feet below the parking lot.
Oh, okay, all right. That's probably, not sure if that's a good or a bad thing, but okay. So it's like Cleveland then. All right. One thing that I like to do is last week John Brown was very chalky because he was well priced. Everyone's pissed off last week because he bombed. I faded him last week. I'm probably going to play him more than most people will this week. Mm-hmm. Based on the idea that Diggs is going to probably draw Humphreys, I'd imagine. And that's not just going to be you're handling Diggs on your own now. They will probably give more. Diggs has been killing teams all season. So I would assume that he's going to be getting game plan for more than anyone else is. Brown at least has wide receiver 1 talent. So that's the angle I'm going to take there. I'm with Cody as well, though. I don't force double stacks. That's not a requirement for me. I'm absolutely comfortable with playing Allen with 2 of his pass catchers and bringing it back with Andrews. Where I would also avoid Hollywood because of the win factor. Because when you're throwing a ball 40, 50 yards in the air and then there's 20-mile-an-hour wind, it's going to be harder to pull that off.
Cody, your thoughts here, and I'd love to hear anything on J.K. Dobbins because we know the Bills can be run on. They have been run on pretty much all season long. He's 6,000 on DK.
Yeah, I like Dobbins as a player, but I don't see it at that price. I was going to pull up prices here because I knew that question was coming next. You said Dobbins is 6K. So he's on DraftKings. So he's just guys that I would rather play over him 1-for-1, and we'll touch on these guys more in depth. But like Kareem Hunt is $1,200 cheaper. CEH, if he goes, is $500 cheaper. Aaron Jones is only $800 more. Nick Chubb is $600 more. Cam Akers is $300 cheaper. We already kind of touched on Singletary. I don't really like Singletary as a back, but he's going to be the only guy there. I mean, they've got complete dust behind him. So yeah, I think Dobbins is still just mispriced. I mean, he's still splitting the backfield with Gus Edwards, whether we want to admit to that or not. It's just fact. He's just splitting carries with him, and then I already touched on Lamar's really the RB1 there in terms of usage from a rushing perspective. And then as far as like J.K. Dobbins' actual production, he's certainly a risk to break a long one because I think he's the more explosive player. But 44% of this guy's DraftKings production since week 13 has come from touchdowns. He scored like every single week since week 13. So if he doesn't find the end zone, we're not talking about a $6,000 Dobbins. We're talking about like a 4K Dobbins because of the usage. So yeah, it's a run heavy team, but I just don't have a ton of interest in Dobbins at the current price tag.
Anything else on this game?
I think you could consider playing Buffalo's defense. Maybe. But we'll get to that at the end.
I mean, if we're going to talk about weather and they say, hey, we're going to get some snow, we're going to get some wind, Baltimore is built for this. This is what they do. They run the rock. And Buffalo, the home team, is, they're the guys out there wide. And, they got the scat back behind them. If it becomes a game where, hey, we have to run the football, Buffalo's screwed.
Yeah, I agree, actually. I do.
And everybody's getting healthy on that Ravens D line, so that could be something to watch for.
Ryan, I did want to ask real quick. That actually looks like it's up there pretty bad. I was looking at Marquise Brown's ADOT, average depth of target. I was just curious if he had been getting. It seemed like, and this is why watching the games for me is like is a tough ask because I'm more just looking at the data. But his ADOT was at 14.1 last week, 10.7 before then. It just felt like anecdotally he was getting more of those kind of pop passes and just kind of letting him work in space. I don't know if you've seen that.
Sure. When he hits, though, it's usually built off a long one. Okay. That's really my thesis with playing him. And I love Hollywood as a player. So, but yes, they are trying to get him the ball in space to see if he can generate any yak.
Hope you guys are digging it out there. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle DFS edition. Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com. Got a couple of ETR boys with me. We've got Cody Main. You can follow him at CMain7 on Twitter, and Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds NFL is where you find him on Twitter. And, if you're digging what we're doing here, again, comment, like, subscribe on YouTube. It helps us out a ton as we get going into the off season and do this all, next year. So maybe a team that is still living high on the hog from last year is the Kansas City Chiefs. They are the Super Bowl champions, and they will begin the defense of their title in the playoffs on Sunday at 3:05 against the Cleveland Browns. This game opened up Chiefs -10 with a 54 total. It's still -10 for the Chiefs, but that total has risen a little bit to 57. Weather looks fine, 41 degrees, mix of sun and clouds. Now, in my game notes here, guys, a lot of interesting stuff. The Browns, everyone has this narrative. The Browns are going to try to run and keep Mahomes off the field and But the Browns are throwing the ball nearly 60% of the time on early downs in the first three quarters since week 12. Now, Kansas City, of course, they lead the league in this. They're number one in early pass down rate. The Browns last week, in the first half, ran 5 times from shotgun. That went 57 yards and a score. They only ran from shotgun in any other game all year 6 times, and they did it 5 times in the first half. They were basically spreading Pittsburgh out, running against light boxes, and look at the success they had. Injury-wise, everybody and their brother on the KC line's been banged up this year, but they're not going to run the rock anyways. CEH, DNP today, iffy to play. We're not sure. You got to pay attention. Again, we're recording this Thursday night. Sammy Watkins, he did not practice on Thursday. I highly doubt he plays for the Browns. Kevin Stefanski, their coach, comes back. We've never had to say that on the show, guys, where from coming back from injuries, the head coach. More importantly, though, they get back Denzel Ward, their outstanding outside corner. Kevin Johnson, their slot corner, is back. Right tackle Jack Conklin hasn't practiced all week with a hamstring, though, and he's no sure thing to play. That would be a major, major loss for the Browns. So you guys didn't sign up for the podcast to hear me talk. Let's get to the experts here. Okay, Chiefs, explosive offense. Browns, they're getting it together. What do you think? Let's start with you, Ryan. How are you betting this game, and what are you seeing from a macro level?
Generally speaking, Andy Reid's tremendous after the bye, as you know, as an Eagle fan. I would say the Chiefs are kind of a unique team in the NFL right now because they're really legitimately only care about winning titles now. They're a potential dynasty. They have the tools to blow the doors off anyone. So them being a little slow / not playing for a while doesn't really bother me for them because they're a veteran team with excellent tools and they've already been there and won it. One concern I have is Mitchell Schwartz is out, and while Cleveland's a very well coached team, they're also a team with excellent lines on both sides of the ball. Mm-hmm. So that's one area where I think they could poke a hole in what the Chiefs do, because you have Myles Garrett where you're going to have to double team him. And on the other side, you have, I would assume that you're going to have whoever Short's replacement is managing things on his own. So that's a potential problem. Reed will probably game plan around that, but that's one concern I have. And I'm with you too. Having watched, the Browns all year, when they think that they're going to be involved in a high scoring game, they don't really come out and play afraid. So while they may run the ball on the Chiefs because that's what they do, and the Chiefs aren't exactly a great run defense, mm-hmm. I don't exactly think they're going to come out conservative either. They understand they're going to have to score points to win this game. So I know you have a couple guys you like on the Cleveland side, Cody. So
yeah, I think the biggest question is, it's a 57-point total, but it's a 10-point spread, right? As last I checked. So my biggest question for you, Ryan, was do you think the Browns can keep it close? First, if you think they're going to get blown out, then I kind of want to change how I approach the game a little bit. From like a can they cover the spread perspective? Do you think they'll keep it close enough for this to be a viable game stack on the KC side or the Cleveland side for that matter?
If I had to pick every game, I would take Kansas City. Do I think Cleveland can compete? Yeah, primarily because they're a team with two strong lines. That means Mayfield's going to be clean for most of the day. They're going to be able to run the ball if they want. So how I've envisioned this game is something in the range of like 25 or 35-24. So
yeah, and that's
my answer is sort of.
Okay, so that's good enough. That kind of helps out. So from like a usage standpoint, because I think Holmes is going to be the highest owned quarterback on the slate. Obviously, we're not going to be able to get Mahomes plus Tyreek plus Kelsey. It's just the slate's too tightly priced, and they're all pretty appropriately priced at this point. So there's not a juice those price tags. So before I dive too far into this on the Cleveland side, do you have a favorite between Tyreek and Kelsey?
I probably prefer Tyreek because Cleveland's not used to playing Tyreek, and his speed can just literally stun people. It's similar to Derrick Henry, where I say he's a unique experience to deal with. Tyreek can be too. That said, if you over game plan for Tyreek, you open up opportunities for Kelsey. So that's pretty much how I view every Chiefs game. I think it's going to be one or the other in most cases.
Okay.
So if I was building multiple lineups, one of them would be in pretty much all of them.
We mentioned earlier how the Bills are bad against the tight end. The Browns are equally as bad, giving up the exact same 15 points a game to the tight end on the season. So that's tied for fourth in the league in terms of most points allowed to the tight end.
And they've allowed the second most total targets to tight ends. So I think that's a kind of feather in the cap for Kelsey, who's obviously going to get targeted a ton regardless. But so we like Kelsey. I think and Tyreek. We probably need a second guy right, Ryan? I mean, it's kind of one of those quarterbacks that we probably want to double stack with, especially where Mahomes is priced. If he's going to put up a slate winning type score, we need a whole lot of points out of him.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're going to get a ton with his legs. He'll probably rush more than we may have expected in the past. I think they kind of might let him loose now that it's playoff time. But if Watkins can't go, are you in on Demarcus Robinson, Mecole Hardman, Byron Pringle? I mean, we got to kind of find we got to find somebody here that we can play.
As far as I'm concerned, Byron Pringle doesn't exist. For better or worse. I know for Hardman's very frustrating for me because I feel like Hill and Hardman should be playing at the same time consistently. But it seems like Hardman's more of his direct. He's more of Hill's. What's the word I'm looking for here?
Oh, he's his direct backup, really.
Yeah. Right. He's his direct backup. Where Robinson seems to have a bigger role when Watkins misses time, and Robinson tends to play more in general, right?
Yeah, the usage backs that up. Watkins missed 5 games this week, kind of a stretch in the middle of the season. In those 5 games, Robinson was third on the team in target share behind the big two with 13% and had a 16.5% air yard share. Hardman played on just 48% of snaps, but it's like he's like Tyreek. I mean, he's Tyreek light. He's obviously not as good, but yeah, they would be a nightmare if those two played together. Now, I don't know if they'll unleash. You know me. I like to lean on historical trends. I don't know if they would just unleash him in the playoffs because they know how much of a nightmare that is to handle. But I think just from like the fantasy community, I think if Watkins gets ruled out, like you're going to see floods of ownership go towards Mecole, right? And probably being the boomer bust type of guy that he is, if there's a lot of ownership there, I'd probably just rather take the Demarcus Robinson route, as unsexy as that sounds. Yeah. But if we think the Chiefs are going to put up 35 points or more, there's going to be some opportunities there for one of these fringier guys, and they're all pretty cheap. So yeah, keep an eye on that, I guess, is the larger point. If you're stacking Mahomes, you for sure want one of Tyreek or Kelsey. I don't think you want to do both unless you have a really good feeling about some value on the slate. But I think they're priced pretty appropriately. So consider these guys like Robinson. Just know he's probably the safer asset, has a lower ceiling. But Hardman's going to get up there in ownership if Watkins ends up getting ruled out. And if Watkins is in, I'm perfectly fine with that too. I think he's got a big game within his range of outcomes. But you asked about the Cleveland side, and there's a guy that I like on the Cleveland side that we kind of had this discussion before the show on, and that's Rashard Higgins. He's 4,100 on DraftKings. It's a pretty small sample, but he's second in the league in explosive pass rate at 22%, and he gets a matchup against the Chiefs secondary that ranks 24th in explosive pass rate allowed. So I think there's some pass there since week 10, really since he's taken over for Odell. He's got a 19% target share and leads the team with a 32% air yard share. So it's the 19% target share is not great, but he's pretty cheap. But getting the air yards that he does, I think if the Browns take a deep shot, it's going to be Higgins. I think he's going to be involved enough in that respect that if he completes one or two, then he might provide enough value to get you there. Plus, he correlates well, obviously, with those Mahomes stacks. So what you had some things to say about Higgins. So what say you about the play in general if you're stacking the Chiefs side?
Well, in general, Higgins is an average player, so he does nothing for me. I don't think his team's going to game plan for him specifically to get involved more. But I agree with you. His matchup's good. He's performed well in high-scoring affairs since Beckham's been out, as I recall. So, yeah, I mean, most weeks Higgins is, he doesn't even exist for me. But in this game, I think you're right. I think he's smart. He should at least be part of your player pool.
He has more yards than Jarvis Landry in 6 of the 9 games since OBJ went out.
That's appalling, but
yeah, I mean, so if we think the Chiefs are going to blow the doors off the Browns, then we have to say, okay, Browns are in catch-up mode. So then we're going to say, okay, well, forget about Nick Chubb and let's go Kareem Hunt, and then you got to look at some of these pass catchers and Austin Hooper and all that. So could that be a real path? Is kind of GTP Browns to build a lineup?
I think Hunt's too cheap, but I also think the narrative of him being a former Chief is going to lead to decent ownership, especially at his price tag. But yeah,
Don't
I
even
mean,
get started on that nonsense. Did you see that? Oh my God.
I didn't call it a revenge game for a reason. I said he's a former Chief.
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I mean, the path for him is that Ravens game. That I think it was 47-42, where the Ravens went up big on him and Hunt went ballistic in the second half. You know, I think that's the path for success for him. I'm not sure Kansas City is going to absolutely blow the doors off Cleveland, but I think they're going to come out and play well, as Andy Reid teams do, especially on offense. So if they score on their first two drives and it's 14-3 or 14-7, that doesn't surprise me at all. And that's the situation we're looking for with Hunt or Higgins in particular.
It doesn't feel great to share this take publicly, but I've kind of been looking at rates for Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb lately after that game last week where they both kind of got there. I kind of have this like sinking feeling that Kareem Hunt really isn't even like the pass catcher that the fantasy community has hyped him up to be. I think he's good in that respect. I just don't think the Browns have really been using him that way.
Right.
I kind of just think of him lately as an RB2, right? Like I think he's just Chubb's backup or change of pace back, if you will. So since week 11, he's been at or below a 10% target share in all but one game. So like it's hard to look at a guy that we automatically assume is going to be that. And now I don't know how many negative game scripts they've been in that respect. I had Sam Hoppen, who does some graphics for some charts for ETR, look this up, but his usage when they're trailing doesn't really change all that much in relation to his usage when they're playing from ahead. Hunt, that is. So I don't view him as this guy that's just automatically going to smash when they get behind. Now that could look like brain dead, in 48 hours or 72 hours or whenever they play. Like that could just look, flatly wrong. But I kind of just view Hunt as like the RB2 who's going to get used enough at 4,800 that he's viable on this slate. I think he's totally fine. But I think Chubb is kind of just the guy there. And if I had to choose just one, I would just find the way to spend up to Chubb, I think, if possible, because I think Chubb's getting used enough in the pass game as well. He's had as many games over a 10% target share as Hunt over the last 8 weeks. So I think they're finding ways to get him involved in the pass game. He's been efficient with that respect. And obviously he's getting the usage on the ground between the 20s. And then as far as goal line usage go, it kind of just depends on, who's on the field. We've seen that like I'll get 4 straight carries inside the 5. And you're like, why aren't you using Nick Chubb? It just happens to be that he wasn't on the field at the time. So yeah, I kind of view them as maybe 1A, 1B is a better way to look at them, but I think you'll see that. And the reason I bring that up is I think you're going to get that narrative steamed pretty hard on top of the quote unquote Chiefs revenge game, which I don't buy into that, but you're going to get the whole, the Browns are going to be trailing. They're going to be featuring Kareem Hunt, the pass game and so on and so forth. So I think his ownership might actually get a little bit steamed as the week goes on.
Me too.
Now the Browns give up the most points per drive of all the teams left in the playoffs at 2.52. And maybe, just maybe, guys, does that open a door for Mr. Baker Mayfield to slip into some lineups at 5,300? Because, everyone's going to be Mahomes and Lamar and Josh Allen and blah, blah, blah. But if we're trying to be a little different here and catch a little less ownership, Baker Mayfield coming back, his team's going to be giving up a lot of points. What do you think?
I'll have some Baker Mayfield lineups, especially with this slate that has so many exceptional skill position players. You can maybe stick in another superstar in there if you play Baker. So yeah, I won't. Right now, my plan is Mahomes, Baker, and probably Breeze, which we'll talk about next, is like the guys that I'll play more than the field maybe. And with Mahomes, I might not even be overweight on Mahomes, but yeah, I'm definitely going to have Baker lineups. Yeah,
shout out to ETR and Levitan, obviously, who does great ownership projections. I'll give you a peek behind the curtain here. He's got Baker at 3% ownership. I think it'll be a little bit higher than that. I mean, he's 5,300. He kind of makes the rest of the slate work if you kind of go that route. But a couple of the guys that we'll touch on in the next game are pretty cheap as well. Mm-hmm. But a $5,300 Baker Mayfield makes it pretty easy to do something that we just said we wouldn't be able to do with Mahomes, and that's play both Kelce and Hill. If you want to play both Kelce and Hill, the way to do it is to play Baker, right? You get a $100 discount off of Mahomes. And Kelce and Hill have accounted for 66% of the Chiefs' receiving production, DraftKings points, that is, on the season. So, yeah, and we just talked about, like, if Watkins is out, we're not super excited about Mecole or DeMarcus Robinson or any of these guys. And CEH might be out. So we're talk about Darrell Williams and Le'Veon Bell. We don't really have a ton of interest in either of those guys. So, yeah, I think an easy way to play that game and a different way to play that game is like a Baker stat. You can get two guys with Baker and two Chiefs pass catchers without Mahomes and just hope that they soak up all the production. So I'm glad you brought that up because I think Baker's firmly in play in this slate, and another reason why we don't really feel the need to go down to Goff.
Let me throw this out there. Complete and utter shot in the dark if you're putting in a 800 lineups. Darwin Thompson. We don't know what CEH's role is going to be. We don't know how healthy he is. Le'Veon Bell looks awful. He's already beat up. You never know, folks. You're trying to win $1 million. You could do worse. Not by much, but maybe.
So, Ryan, let me ask you, because I was looking into rates on the thought that CEH would be out, and obviously we can kind of throw away week 17 because they didn't play Darrell or Le'Veon Bell at all. But I looked at week 16. They played Darrell Williams got 53% of the team's rushing attempts. Le'Veon Bell got 37%. Did you catch that game? Was there a reason why Darrell Williams was kind of the featured guy there? I really don't know.
Well, this is what I always say about Darrell Williams. He's very similar to Latavius Murray from a skill set perspective. He's solid at everything. He's a good pass catcher. He's a solid runner. He's an above average pass blocker. So I think his reliability is why they tend to lean on him when other players miss. I agree. Bell is, not what he used to be. It's just as simple as that. Darwin, I'm kind of a Darwin Thompson guy. And one of the reasons is if you look at Brian Westbrook's combine versus Darwin Thompson's pro day, they're almost the same. They're very similar athletes. So he fits in well with what Reed does schematically, particularly as a pass catcher. So while I certainly wouldn't put Darwin Thompson in a single entry lineup, if I was making 150, I'd probably have a touch of exposure to him. Mm-hmm. Just in case, like when Claypool went off early in the season, someone won $1 million because Claypool caught 4 touchdowns out of nowhere. I would think of it in that respect. I'd have a very small exposure to Darwin, but I expect that if CH misses, we're probably looking at 40-40 for Darrell and Le'Veon and probably 20 for Darwin in terms of percentage of running back snaps.
Who would have thought that on a slate with Devontae Adams and Alvin Kamara and Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill that we'd be talking about Darrell Williams and Darwin Thompson?
Hey, you got to dig deep, man. You got to dig deep.
You're right.
For me,
I think I do think it might be a little too thin for me. But now you got to keep in mind I'm playing this through the lens of like I'm playing the single entry 3 max type of stuff.
Yeah, you can't put him in that. Yeah.
No, and Ryan, you guys are right. Like if CEH is out, there certainly is a possibility that one of these guys forces their way into a winning lineup, particularly in a blowout environment. So I would play it that way. Whatever you think happens, like if you think one of these guys gets there. Now Le'Veon isn't really that cheap. He's 5,100. Darrell's 4,000. I think the running back floor this year is now just flatly 4,000. So you're not going to get these guys at like 3K. Darrell Williams at 4,000, and then Darwin. Obviously, if CH gets ruled out, he would be the third active back. I'm sure he's 4,000 too. But yeah, it kind of sets up as a difficult spot if all 3 of those guys are active. I think they'd probably just split the carries, and you're just hoping to run hot on touchdown variants.
I don't think there's any way you can put CEH in a lineup, even if he's active, for the fact that the guy's got a groin injury, didn't practice today. So now you're going to put a guy in your lineup who very easily could aggravate it in the first quarter, and then he sits out the rest of the game. To me, it just puts even more on Patrick Mahomes. The line's beat up. They're not going to run the ball down anybody's throat. It's going to be back there. I think quick pass game. Kelce is going to have 400 catches in this game. We didn't touch on it much, but Austin Hooper. Let's get your thoughts on him. As kind of if we're doing the Baker Mayfield thing, let's bring it back with Austin Hooper. He's been playing pretty well of late.
I mean, if you're going to go cheap at tight end, he's an option. I'm not overly optimistic about him, but it like is the case with Higgins, it is a good game environment for him.
3,800.
Yeah, he's
11
cheap.
targets last week.
Yeah, he's cheap.
Yeah, he's pretty cheap. I don't feel all that strongly about him as a player, but yeah, like week 15, 20% target share, week 16, 30% target shares, 19 in week 17, and 32.4% target share in last week. So yeah, he's going to be involved, and if they're forced into more passing attempts, he's certainly an easy way to correlate that game. Particularly if you want to just play Tyreek, you can lock up the tight end position with Austin Hooper. I think he might be a little bit higher owned than projected right now, simply because he's kind of the cheapest viable option. We'll touch on a guy in the last game that we have some things to say, but he's kind of the cheapest viable option who can compete at the position. So I think his ownership will get a little bit steamed, but he's certainly in play.
I was telling Ryan before the show, if there's one thing I do, and Dwayne has coined me this, the garbage tight end whisperer. Like, I will find some scrub tight end who's going to score, a la Dawson Knox last week.
We did. You called it.
Yeah.
So let's get to a game. Age in the Cage, Halloween Havoc, 1997. It's not Roddy Piper and Hulk Hogan. It's Drew Brees and Tom Brady from the Superdome. There's no weather, so don't worry about any of that. Opened up Saints 3.5 with a 49 total. Now it's just straight Saints -3, but the total's gone up to 52 at a lot of spots. Third meeting between the two teams, Saints won both. The last one was kind of a laugher. Injury-wise, Ronald Jones got some work in this one, but if he doesn't play, we're back to the Leonard Fournette show, 19 carries in wild card weekend. You know, some other stuff that we can touch on here. Marshawn Lattimore, every time it seems he matches up with Mike Evans, he just owns him. Saints are going to play a ton of man, so that's what Brady's going to see all game long. Guys, let's get into this here. First off, let's start with the quarterbacks. Any interest in Tom Brady or Drew Brees, two guys who are obviously, we know, instant Hall of Famers, but they don't do anything with their legs. I mean, Drew Brees can't even jump over the line and stretch out far enough to set off the Nickelodeon slime cannons. So do we have any interest in those guys this weekend?
I think both are reasonable to play. I like Brees at his price tag personally, because when you're playing Tampa, what Tampa does well is Tampa's a good run defense. They're very good in the middle. They're very good in the interior. That lends itself to me, especially with their range at linebacker, where this is an uphill battle game for Kamara. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean Kamara's going to bomb or anything like that. Kamara's kind of his own entity, where he can still have 6 catches for 60 yards and 60 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns and be what you need to get there. For me, though, Michael Thomas is probably the guy I'll be the most overweight on this week. I'm not afraid of any cornerback matchup they throw at him. I think New Orleans is going to be forced to throw more than run. I think another factor, I know Cody's a big double stack guy. The idea of stacking Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders with Brees and then bringing it back with one of the Bucs is something that I'm not allergic to either. On the Tampa side, I have not had a good feel on who to play at all this year for them. So I'll lean on you for that, Cody. What are your thoughts for the Tampa side?
Yeah, just overall the game, it's a great game environment. Drake, as you mentioned, they're in the dome. It's the second highest total on the slate. It's a close spread, so I don't think we're too worried about blowout. Pretty good rush defenses on both sides. I think both teams are incentivized to pass. Tampa Bay has been throwing at one of the league's highest rates all year, and then their defense has been thrown on at one of the league's highest rates, especially in situation neutral game environments, which we're expecting. We're kind of expecting this to be played with 1-4. So there's just going to be a ton of passing attempts in this game. I kind of think that's the way that this goes. Now, neither of these teams are all that explosive. Obviously, with 40-year-old quarterbacks under center, you're kind of getting some noodle arm performances. Now, that's not to say that they can't complete passes. I just think that if you're playing this game, it's going to be a slow burn. And that's why I'm so into the double stack. If I'm playing either one of these quarterbacks, I don't think they're going to hit those 50, 60, 70-yard bombs to Mike Evans or to Michael Thomas. I think it's going to be the way they get there is on volume, on a lot of receptions, and they're going to slowly grind their way to the yardage totals and the touchdowns that they need to get there. On the Tampa side, I'm always partial to Mike Evans. I wrote up this game for the showdown on ETR, so I'm kind of familiar with rates and stuff on that side, but I think Evans is just like the alpha there. I don't know how much this narrative that Lattimore shut him down, and it's not really narrative. It's totally been borne out over the last couple of years. He's really has shut him down. I don't know how much that's going to get played up this week, so I don't know how much Evans' ownership will be brought down by that. But I think if I'm playing somebody from the Tampa side, it starts with Evans for me. And then if I'm playing the Breeze side, which I like Breeze's price tag, he's pretty cheap. Obviously, the single stack there is Thomas. And who would have thought, at the beginning of the year, now there's some serious ballers on this slate, but he's $1,900 cheaper than Devontae Adams. He's $1,300 cheaper than Hill, $600 cheaper than Diggs, just $300 more expensive than Evans. So he's still priced really nicely, and he came back from the ankle injury and looked 100% to me. So who'd you say your second guy would be if you're playing the Breeze stack? You said it would be Sanders.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, his rates do take a huge hit with Thomas back, as everyone would expect. The tags come back to earth a little bit. He's 4,500, and he's going to be pretty low owned. I think the other route you can go, and we talk about this a lot, but just correlate with the tight end position. Jared Cook isn't playing a ton of snaps, but I think he's still got the red zone usage. I think he could still catch a touchdown and get there for you. And obviously, you still have the route with the Kamara through the pass game. He can certainly catch enough dump offs to get there too. So I know you kind of have a different feel for the Tampa Bay wide receivers generally than I do. What do you think about Godwin and Brown?
Every week it seems like someone else is the focal point to me, just like visually. I'm not really a huge fan of Godwin as a talent. I get why he's productive to a degree, but his season last year, him and Schuster are two guys where I just don't get it. Brown isn't what he used to be, but he's closer to what he used to be than I thought he was going to be. So, again, I agree with you. Evans is definitely the best receiver on that team. The last time I remember him hitting against Lattimore was when Fitzpatrick was the Bucs quarterback on opening day a few years ago. And that was built off a deep ball. So I think that's the path for Evans, and I think it's possible. As far as which guy, if I had to pick one, I'd probably peg Godwin out of the three.
Let's pivot over to running back right now. And I mean, it took us an hour to get here, but we're going to talk about maybe the best running back in football all around, and that's Alvin Kamara. He's the most expensive running back on the slate for DraftKings. He's $7,900. Over the last 2 weeks now, he has set career highs in rushing attempts in 22 and 23 attempts. So they're giving him the rock and basically saying, hey, kid, you're our offense. Everything is going to run through you. They're, the passing tree, it's very limited. They don't have the Johnny Lee Lewis and, Billy Ray Cyrus and every other guy that they had out there catching balls over the last few years. So, I mean, Alvin Kamara on a slate where we've got every great quarterback you could possibly want. We've got high-end receivers. Do we pay up to get Kamara at 7,900 in our lineups?
I mean, it's certainly reasonable. One thing I'll add about last week was I don't know exactly how many running back carries he had at the end of the game, but he closed that game out. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say he was the focal point in the first half, but at the end of the game, he definitely closed that contest out. So if they're up on Tampa, he'll probably see more rushing workload than normal. And for me, whenever I'm playing Kamara, the weeks that I go heavy on him, it's because I think he's going to catch 6+ passes. I would think his path to success this week will be in the air. Sure. If he really has a big one, it will be built off 6 receptions or more.
What's Latavius Murray's status? I didn't see any updates. If he's out, then obviously the workload. He left last week's game with a quad injury. I think it was a quad contusion.
Yeah. That's probably why Kamara finished. Yeah,
it was. Yeah, if he's out again, then obviously the rushing workload is there. Like Ryan said, I don't really care how much Kamara gets on the ground between the 20s. It's kind of a nice bonus. I think I mentioned it last week. He's like a wide receiver one in a running back's body. But the usage has pretty much been there from that standpoint. Obviously, he takes a hit with Michael Thomas back. He didn't see a ton of targets last week, but I'm not overly concerned about that. I think they'll be there going forward, especially in negative game script. But what would be more exciting if Latavius Murray is out would just be the volume near the goal line. We don't have the risk of him being vultured by two guys because we don't have to worry about Latavius Murray. We still have to worry about Taysom Hill.
Yeah. Well, Taysom Hill didn't practice today.
Oh,
as a guy who loves the NFL, I'd love nothing more than not have to see that guy step on the field next week.
So you could see no Taysom Hill, no Latavius Murray. So the ultimate, Sean Payton move here. Let's get Ty Montgomery goal line vulturing here in the playoffs.
I mean,
the thing is with all the high priced guys, I think, and Levitan's got this with his ownerships. I think Kamara is going to be the highest owned by a little bit. So I think the ownership's already there. He's obviously a fine play, and if you're playing a more contrarian stack, feel free to throw in Kamara because he's probably the most likely to hit among the running backs. But I think there are a few pivots off of Kamara that we've touched on who can offer similar upside at a cheaper price tag and lower ownership. But yeah, there's not a bad thing to say about Kamara, I don't think.
How about Fournette if there's no Ronald Jones?
One thing I like about Fournette is he's a direct salary pivot off Hunt. And there's a path to him catching 5-6 balls, especially if Tampa's trailing, because the Saints actually have a decent pass rush and Brady's a statue. So I like that aspect for him.
Well, I think if Jones is active, I don't think I'll go there, but I can see.
Yeah, agree.
If Jones is out, then there's obviously a path to. Did Keyshawn Vaughn have a fumble last week? I didn't even watch that game.
Yeah.
But I think Keyshawn Vaughn struggled, and obviously there's no trust in LaShawn McCoy at this point, so he's going to be the feature back if Jones is out. But I think it looked like Rojo is going to play this week. So
yeah, no, that's a mess there with Jones in, and the idea of Keyshawn Vaughn playing in a playoff game is just absurd to me. They basically didn't use him all season. And if nothing else, Fournette's at least a professional running back. I'm actually very surprised that Vaughn got as much work as he did last week.
Yeah, hey, I actually took Keyshawn Vaughn in the first round of a dynasty draft. I won the league, so I had the last pick of the first round. It was like pick 14 or something. What an awful pick.
No. Long term, I don't have any issue with it, but they didn't really use him at all during the regular season, right? Like he got very, very limited usage. They're just like, oh, here, we're in the playoffs now. Very surprised to see that.
Anything else on the slate, guys? Any other nuggets you want to drop on the hustle listeners out there?
So we did this off show last week. Do you want to build a lineup on?
Let's do it. Do you want to build a snowman? Let's do it right here.
I hate to put you guys on the spot, but let's do it on air.
I mean, we can at least talk about it, sure. As long as I'm not the one manning the lineup, I'm good.
I got the lineup in front of me here. Okay, you say names, I'll punch them in.
Who do you want? What game stack do you want to play, Cody?
I want Ravens Bills, but I know you want something different, so I don't know if we need to.
No, that's fine. We can do that. Okay. Which side of it do you want to do?
Lamar and Andrews.
Okay. With who coming back? We'll let you think about that.
You gonna go John Brown?
I want to go. I think I want to double it on the way back, but I don't know how you feel about that. I couldn't really catch your vibe on stream. Let's start with Diggs and see if we don't need to force the double, but let's start with Diggs and see if maybe I can talk you into John Brown.
I mean, Beasley's less than $5,000 too.
The only concern I have with that this week is that there's so many good games to play that I don't want to just be focused on one. Where in other instances, I do want to target one game and overload that game, especially on a short slate. Usually I take a stance on one game, but I legitimately think that there's 3 games that could exceed 50 points. Mm-hmm. So that's not really normal.
You're saying what we talked about earlier, where you'd rather mini correlate as opposed to just kind of full onslaught a game.
Maybe.
I'm cool with.
I want to see how it develops versus force it, basically. This actually brings up a question I wanted to ask you, which actually disgusts me to even mention it. Considering how we feel about both Kelsey and Andrews, how awful is it to play both of them?
No, let's do it. I was thinking about that earlier, that this with Andrews and Kelsey, because I like Andrews better than Hollywood 1-for-1.
Yeah,
might be a hot take. I don't know, but if you think about Andrews as just a play in and of himself and kind of ignore position. I think if you think he outscores Marquise Brown, then why not play him in the flex? Or why not play why not play Kelsey in the flex? So yeah, let's do that. Let's plug Kelsey into the flex.
Okay. We don't.
That's my thought process here too. I never play two tight ends in one lineup. Never put a tight end in the flex. Neither one of these guys are really tight ends, though, if we're being honest. So I think this is interesting. And back to running backs, with as Brian said. For me this week, my biggest challenge is playing the second. Who's the second running back? So what are your thoughts on running back? I'm very curious.
I'm still in on Cam Akers, even though I think the game could get weird.
Okay. Do we want to play Akers in the Rams defense then? Is that what we want to do?
I'm cool with that. That's going to be unique.
I'm willing to take a shot on that.
All right, so we need one more running back and a pair of receivers, which I think the receivers is, from hearing you guys, that's where you want to kind of find a different game. Maybe they go against each other or stack a pair.
So we do need to save some salary. Obviously, I'm plugging it in along with you, Drake. We've got 4,600 left, 4,700 left.
Yep.
So
what do you?
We're playing Brown or Higgins? Right?
Higgins.
Okay.
Got to get my scroll on to get down to Higgins.
Thank you for not calling him Hollywood Higgins on the air, too. I appreciate that.
Hollywood. He's the real Hollywood on this slate.
He probably is. He probably will be this week. He probably will outscore the other Hollywood.
We need a side wager if you'll give me odds on like Hollywood Higgins versus Hollywood Brown.
I have no interest in that, honestly. Which sucks because if Hollywood Brown was a Packer, I'd be very excited this week. But since he's in Baltimore, I'm good. I'll pass. Definitely not giving you odds, that's for sure. Right, so what do we got left?
We got about 5K left.
5K a man, and we need a running back and a wide receiver. John Brown fits, Cole Beasley fits, Manny Sanders fits, Lazard.
I don't mind playing two Bills. That doesn't bother me.
Let's plug in Brown and see what it looks like.
All right, we got 5,300 left for a running back. So, I mean, really, it's pretty open for us. We can get Kareem Hunt in there. You can get Singletary.
I think I would looking at the options we have left. I think I would move Brown to Beasley.
Okay.
I would go up to Beasley. The reason I would do that in this lineup, I think Brown's ceiling does take away a little bit from Diggs, right?
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
And if that pass rush, which we know is healthy, is getting in Allen's face and he's getting rid of the ball quick, he's going to be hitting Beasley with 6-7 short gainers.
We could go crazy here too, and we could play Beasley and Brown. And could we get to Camaro if we did that? Is the other running back?
Let me try.
Just as a conversation point.
No, we're $200 short.
Okay.
So I think we go Beasley, Diggs, and then we can get Hunt in that game to kind of correlate along with Kelsey a little bit.
Okay. That's fair.
Okay, so we got Beasley, Diggs. So the lineup we built here, we've got Cody Main and Ryan Reynolds from EstablishTheRun.com. We just threw something together here, and it's Lamar Jackson, 7,600. Our running backs, Cam Akers and Kareem Hunt. At wide receiver, we're going Stephon Diggs. We're going Hollywood Higgins, your boy, Cole Beasley. At tight end, Mark Andrews. We're flexing Travis Kelce, and we've got the Rams D. So a little contrarian here. Really, what's going to win or lose this for you is if the Rams get bombed out by Aaron Rodgers and if you don't hit with these two kind of low-end wide receivers.
So, and the other thing that we didn't really talk about, we talked about this off air, but we didn't really touch on it a whole lot on the show, is the reason why this slate is so compelling from, the fact that the DraftKings graced us with the 4-game slate is that we have so many opportunities to late swap. So keep an eye on that in the contest that you're playing. And if you don't have anybody from this first game, just open up some, whether you want to download the CSV from DraftKings or whether you want to open up your contest, just look and see how high owned some of these guys are. Look and see how high owned Devontae Adams is, or Cam Akers is, or the Packers defense is. And you can adjust your approach for later in the afternoon or Sunday based on how the first game goes. And you can keep iterating your lineup based off of that. If you don't play a chalky Cam Akers or a chalky Devontae Adams or a chalky Packers defense and they bomb, you can afford to be a little bit chalkier later on. So maybe say you started with a Bucs Saints stack and you didn't play anybody from that first game, and then that first game just bombs. Let's say it goes 17-10 and Aaron Jones bombs and Devontae Adams fails and Aaron Rodgers underproduces. You can adjust your lineup based off of that if those guys are higher owned. And conversely, if you play somebody that's low owned from that first game, let's say you play an MVS at like 5% ownership and he catches an 80-yard touchdown. Again, you can kind of adjust your lineup from there based off of how the first game goes and so on. You need to be doing that after every game. It's the only way if you're playing like seriously. If you're just playing casually and you want to have fun, sure, go in and adjust it if you feel like it. But if you're playing seriously and trying to win money, you need to be adjusting your lineup because you're just getting more information. Every time one game plays on this slate, you're getting 25% more information than you had the game prior. So right now we don't have anything. We don't know what ownership is going to be. We don't know what performances are going to be. But after that first game plays, we've got 25% of the slates played. You can adjust. After the second game, 50% of the slates played, and you can adjust, and so on and so forth. So keep an eye out for that type of thing. It's just a really good slate from that perspective because there's a ton of good options you can pivot to that won't catch a ton of ownership.
Great info. Awesome point. I like that. So final thoughts, gentlemen. Anything?
I'm surprised that I allowed a single entry lineup to be done on the air that didn't have Michael Thomas in it, but otherwise I like that. I would also say that that lineup would be aggressive. Would you gentlemen agree?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I think so. We got a little chalk in there. I think Lamar Jackson's going to catch plenty of ownership. Diggs will catch plenty of ownership. Andrews and Kelsey aren't all that off the board, but we did get a little weird with Higgins in the double Buffalo, double Buffalo receivers with no. But hey, Buffalo's going to throw the ball, and if Lamar just outscores Allen, we don't care, right? Allen can throw for 303 as long as Lamar rushes for one and passes two to Andrews. We don't care, right? No. We just need him to simply outscore Andrews. I just think that Buffalo, as long as that game doesn't get, as long as the weather there doesn't get way out of hand, I think they're going to continue to throw the ball, especially with Moss out. They're going to lean on those 4 wide receiver sets, and I feel like even though Baltimore's got a good secondary, they're just going to be overwhelmed. So yeah, it's aggressive, but hey, we got Hollywood Higgins. We got the lineup.
I don't mind being aggressive at all. I just want to let people know that this isn't like a standard lineup. This is an aggressive one.
We could get a double Hollywood stack. We'll do that off the air. We get Higgins, we get Brown. We'll find we'll find somebody else. Hollywood Hogan. That's who we get. So we'll get one of those quarterbacks. Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed it. It's division playoff round weekend for Cody Main, Ryan Reynolds of EstablishTheRun.com. Thank you so much for spending a little time on your weekend with us. I'm Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com. Again, if you like the show, give us a nice review on iTunes. If you're on YouTube watching, just hit that like button, hit that subscribe. Help us out a lot. We appreciate it. We'll be back on Tuesday where Dwayne and I are going to be talking with Jordan McNamara, talking about Dynasty League football and all that good stuff. So if you're going in DFS mode, you want to get into Dynasty, whatever your heart desires, man, we're doing it here on The Hustle. So for these fine gentlemen, I bid you adieu. Sorry about the technical difficulties at the beginning, but hey, what are you going to do for a show you get for free? Enjoy it. Take it easy, folks.